This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Authority Strike Herbicide from FMC. One application of Authority Strike Herbicide delivers a powerful one-pass burn-off to start, followed by extended weed control later. See your local retailer today for more information.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, brought to you today by the new Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from Nufarm. Oxbow is powered by Duplasm technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in wheat and barley. You can find out more by going to nufarm.ca. I'm Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Well, today we got a great lineup for you. I hope you had yourself a great long weekend. It was a holiday weekend in the U.S. as well as in Canada. And I know that I had a great time spending family day with some of the family. It was great. We had a really good weekend. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But, today on the show, we're going to hear from Drew Lerner of World Weather Inc. to give a bit of a forecast on what we can expect in Western Canada. We've also got a product spotlight with Larry Penner, talking about the CSGA's Choose Certified Seed campaign. We're also going to talk to Jennifer Wright. Now, Jennifer is with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council, a new report out talking about the labor shortage in agriculture. And, of course, this is, it doesn't feel like it's getting any better. I got some thoughts, too, on if I was running a farm. I'm running a media company, but if I was running a farm, I kind of know what I would be focusing on, thinking out over the horizon as I have to deal with my HR issues. We're going to get into that here in a little bit. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, or you can call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. I spent the weekend in Joplin, Missouri, and we were watching our oldest son play college baseball for the University of Mary. Came up short, 1-3 record on the weekend for the Mary Marauders. We froze to death in Missouri. Man alive. I think Friday afternoon was the coldest baseball game I have ever been at in my entire life. Snowsuits, parka, blankets. My wife was in a sleeping bag. We were still frozen. Unreal. But son had a great weekend, and Marauders will be okay. It was fun. I love me some college baseball. So it was really, really a great time, and really enjoyed Joplin. It was nice. I'd like to go there in the summertime. I think it would. I'd like to be there in the summer, close to the Ozarks, and cool stuff indeed. We've got some feedback here today on the show we're going to go through real quickly. So I got an email here from, up first, Mike. And Mike says, hey, thanks, Shaun, for the interesting discussions on your show, bringing the issues forward. We need to remember that even though it's not as good as it has been, but it's still better than it was in the 80s, so it depends on your outlook and how long it took to build your castle. He's referring to Friday's show where we heard from Ed from Cargill talking about defend your castle. Mike continues, as a fourth-generation farmer, it's been a lot worse than $13 canola and $8.50 wheat. Thanks for the dive into this industry we love to talk about. Hey, Mike, really appreciate you listening to the program. Also got an email here from Jerry, who says, sometimes I can't imagine the hypocrisy that is out there. Now, Jerry watched a video from our Agritechnica coverage brought to you by Optimum Gly. And one of the things that, Jerry continued, we seed place fertilizer in 80-plus feet sectional controlled and variable rated using GPS to seed between the rows and ESN/urea or treated urea. And Amazon is boasting about being able to spread fertilizer on top accurately to the outside width. And our government is crapping on us when this is what our competition is proud of. So, Jerry, not a fan of the broadcast fertilizers. Not at all. We did a video on border control for a broadcast fertilizer spreader. So yeah, not all production systems can do the seed placed fertilizer. And from a top up perspective, or maybe it's like a past year situation, the spin spreader does have a fit for sure, and some of the precision on them is pretty phenomenal. So yeah, I guess if you look at it, comparing seed placed in a no-till system in Western Canada versus broadcast, well, we know which one would be more accurate, right? But in some production systems, we're not afforded the luxury of some of that seed placed fertilizer. So, but Jerry, I do get your point, and we need to look at these things all in context. I think I get your point though, in terms of some of the way our government looks at some of the things we currently are already doing, and especially when we do compare it to Europe, and comparing how our production system and some of the things that we're doing compared to Europe. Sometimes we don't get the benefit of the doubt. So good points there. For sure. Also got another email from Doug. He says, we're going to talk about the cattle industry. Doug says, frequent listener to your show, mostly on the podcast when I'm feeding cows. Just a note in your show, the one topic you bring up again and again is growing or rebuilding the cow herd. I know when I was in Orlando for NCBA a few weeks ago, they spoke about this a lot. You have Ann on your show to talk about this as well. As a cow-calf background and producer in central Alberta, just south of Rimbey, I really do challenge if that is something we even want to do. It has taken drought, depressed markets, age of producers to drop cow numbers to where calf values are finally to a spot I can get excited. You have worked with Justin Funk on how farmers feel with RealAgri studies. In Canada, we seem to be very depressed about the markets and the industry. I can tell you today with a slide in cow numbers over the past few years and more to come, I'm truly excited for the first time in many years. Personal opinion, the herd will not rebuild anytime soon. A lot of risk to be taken on the cow side, but if you have grass, some winter feed and water, I think is finally an exciting time to own cows. I'm just not sure expanding the herd is the right answer. Hey, appreciate that email, Doug. Yeah. I get your point. One of the reasons prices are where they are is because the numbers have slid, right? And we need a time right now where the cow-calf producer is profitable over a longer period of time. We need sustained margins for that cow-calf producer. Long-term, though, strategically, I think we do need to build the herd. We can't always just be a guaranteed feeder cattle importer from the U.S. if we're going to have a Canadian industry. I think that's one of the things I want to latch on to continually. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to hear from Drew Lerner. He's got some weather forecasts for us for Western Canada, speaking of the cow herd. You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Oxbow cereal herbicide from Nufarm.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's strong portfolio of wheat, durum, barley, oats, peas, and rye, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your certified seed strategy specific to your region.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by the new Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from Nufarm. Oxbow is powered by Duplasm technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in wheat and barley. Find out more by going to nufarm.ca. Well, as we approach seeding and planting time, we're obviously thinking about the weather. And for sure out in Western Canada, where there continues to be, well, very much a dry bias is one way to put it. Last week at Crop Connect in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Kelvin had a chance to catch up with Drew Lerner, famed weather forecaster and meteorologist, and hopefully he brings some good news. Let's hear what he has to say.
Pleased to be joined now by Drew Lerner of World Weather Inc. And Drew, of course, lots of questions about what spring is going to bring here in Western Canada. Large areas of the prairies are, of course, dry. A lot of that you talked about today depends on the El Nino La Nina transition that is underway right now.
That's right. El Nino is on its way out. It should go away fairly quickly. That's going to open the door for a little bit of moisture this spring. Not a lot, because the 18-year cycle is not going to promote a lot of moisture. It's not going to support it, but there will be opportunities for more moisture. We've already seen a little bit of this, and as we go forward now, we'll probably see a little bit more of it. The issue is whether or not La Nina will kick in and do so quickly enough to change our weather patterns. And in the past, when we've moved from an El Nino to a La Nina in a short period of time, the impact on the prairies is usually fairly significant with rains widespread. That would be, in this case, later in this growing season. But if we transition slowly, we'll still have some benefit from the moisture, but just may not be quite as abundant. But either way, the combination of losing El Nino and maybe going into a La Nina can be helpful to us.
Okay. You mentioned the 18-year cycle as well. That's another pattern that you're looking at, and that would bring us back to 2005, 2006. We won't talk about the 18-year period. What would be 18 years before that, though?
Yeah, that's right. That was 1988 that you're hedging on. Yeah, it is one of the 18-year cycle year members. But what's interesting is that all of these 18-year cycle years all seem to have a little bit of a drier bias in the middle of North America for the summer, for sure, and in the spring for the U.S., as far as the plains in the western Midwest. It's a very interesting anomaly that shows up there, and kind of interesting also down in the States that if we do have a La Nina, that La Nina will help to enhance the drier and warmer scenario that's already in the 18-year cycle down there. But for the prairies, it's a different story. We've got an environment here that will bring us kind of a mix of weather this spring. We are not going to fix Alberta, southern Alberta, with any weather event this spring. We'll have, don't get me wrong, we're going to see some opportunities for moisture, but we're not going to take care of that long-term moisture deficit, and we're still going to have low water supply there for the irrigation, and so that's going to be an issue. But as we go forward into the summer, the environment should become a little bit more favorable for a greater amount of moisture to come into play for southern Alberta. I think at the moment it looks like northern Alberta is probably more favored for an abundantly moist summer over that of the south, but it's still early in the game, so we'll see what happens. But I do think that improvement is in store for just about everybody.
Okay, improvement, but not maybe, like you said, fully restoring our moisture deficit.
Absolutely not. Not out in the southwestern parts of the region. Palliser's Triangle will still have some challenges this spring. I fully expect us to have some timeliness rain. We had a little bit of that last spring, but the rains were so erratic, and there was so much warmth there too that we just fell behind the 8 ball and never got out of it. I don't think we'll have that kind of warmth this spring, but I do think the rains will be erratic. It will be greater volume of moisture than what we saw last year, but still, hit and miss type, and still leaving us crying for more. But I do think we'll be able to get into the fields, but it's going to be another one of those years trying patience for the Palliser's Triangle area.
Okay. I think I saw a local meteorologist say this is the 25th day where we've had at least 5 degrees above normal temperature here in this part of the world. What's your explanation for this abnormally warm winter that we've seen in much of North America?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with El Nino. El Nino was a moderately strong event. If you go back in history and look at all the El Nino events in the past, they've always been warmer biased in the western part of the nation. So that was primary. But in addition to that, some of these temperatures have been even farther above normal than what you would even expect with an El Nino. Some of that came from the 18-year cycle, and some of that may be kind of influenced from what happened from the volcano that erupted in 2022, where there was moisture put into the stratosphere, and that's preventing the Earth from cooling down as much as it would normally.
So that volcano is still affecting global weather patterns right now?
I believe it is, but we don't have a lot of data to make comparisons with. This volcano in 2022, 2 years ago, was the biggest volcanic eruption in modern times, and there was even bigger than Krakatoa. But it was a non-populated area. But the point of this is that we did take atmospheric measurements from this volcano, but we have no other volcano that was even comes close to comparing it to, and let alone have any data for it. So we really don't know. And I can sit here and make up all kinds of stuff, and you can't tell me I'm wrong. So,
yeah. What was it though? Moisture vapor was it 36 miles into the atmosphere?
Yeah, when this volcano erupted, it did shoot a water vapor and particulate matter 36 miles up into the atmosphere, and added 10% moisture to the stratosphere where it's normally very dry. And that moisture up there has set the stage for keeping the heat from escaping from where we live in the troposphere.
All right. Well, good to see you in person again, Drew. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day.
So you're saying there's a chance? That was Drew Lerner of World Weather Inc. talking to Real Agriculture's Kelvin Hepner last week in Winnipeg, Manitoba at Crop Connect. We got more Crop Connect coverage coming up here in a little bit. We just need a chance. We need an opportunity. We just need Mother Nature to come through in some regard for some of these areas. And it doesn't need to be a full replenishment. Absolutely not. That's okay. We're not asking for the moon here. We're just asking to get this crop out of the ground. Just a few timely showers. We're not asking for too much, right? Anyway, we'll see what Mother Nature does, and obviously time will tell. But depending where you are, farmers are definitely looking for more moisture on the Western Canadian prairies, which, of course, as we've been discussing, is the opposite on the other side of the country in Atlantic Canada, where the tap just doesn't seem to really want to shut off. So this is the disparity that is the moisture conditions in Canada. And, of course, there are examples as well in the United States where it's very, very similar to that. So, anyway, it's we'll see what comes as we get a little bit closer to planting time. It's great to hear from Drew Lerner. Definitely one of the great guys when it comes to not only weather forecast but in agriculture. So good to see him again. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we've got a product spotlight coming up, and we're also going to hear from Jennifer Wright of the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council talking about, you guessed it, a labor shortage for 2030. Some new data out, very, very concerning, and we'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Whether you're a rookie soybean grower or a seasoned vet, the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com has exactly what you need to stay in the game. The latest research and the best agronomic advice from industry experts, along with local and global market coverage on demand, anywhere, anytime. Make this growing season your best growing season with the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com.
Co-op AgZone Field is a digital agronomy tool designed to help optimize your operation. through integrated layers of satellite imagery, soil maps, yield data, and more. Co-op Grow Team members use AgZone Field to provide organized, timely, in-season data, allowing you to make informed management decisions quickly and effectively. Trust your Co-op Grow Team to support your operation with AgZone Field. Contact your local co-op today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am Lindsay Smith, and it is time for today's Product Spotlight. We are going to talk about the Canadian Seed Growers Association's Choose Certified Seed promo campaign. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce Larry Penner. He's with Penwest Seeds out of Alberta. How are you today, Larry?
I'm doing great, Lindsay. Thanks for asking.
All right. Now, okay, we're going to talk about certified seed. This is near and dear to your heart. Tell me, how is certified seed different from regular or common seed?
Yeah, it is near and dear to my heart. When you're planting certified seed and you choose certified seed, you know that you're getting the pure product. Whereas, as a commercial farmer and my background in that area, years and years we would keep seed, and then we were wondering why we weren't getting maybe the results that we had expected. And part of it was, I think, impurities, not true to type after a while. You just lose some of the really important characteristics of a pure variety. And so that's it in a nutshell. It's they maintain quality. The certified seed goes through rigorous certification. There's a lot of planning that takes place to get it ready, and there's cleanliness and all the attention to details that goes with producing certified seeds.
Now, when I think certified seed, I think about that blue tag and what that means. So why, you've mentioned some of these, but why should a farmer choose certified seed for their farm over some of the other options?
Well, certified seed and the blue tag is really important, because that's the signal that, you're choosing a product that has been quality controlled. People are more concerned about food, in this day and age, and as time goes on, they want to know where their food comes from. Well, certified seed fills that concern, because you know exactly with traceability where the seed has come from. We can trace it from generation to generation, and so it gives people confidence, to know that they're getting a good product. And then, the population is growing, and so we're trying to produce more and more food, and sometimes with less and less acres. And the breeding programs that are out there, they're tackling these problems. They're increasing yield. They're increasing the number of varieties that are tolerant to drought and some of these adverse effects and pests. And so, it's important that we talk about it now.
Mm-hmm. Certified seed, of course, has been around for well over 100 years here in Canada. CSGA has launched this Choose Certified Seed campaign now. Why is it so important to have this conversation today?
I think that people just don't understand what goes into certified seed, and it is so important, because most people, if you look at some of the statistics, 9 out of 10 bites of food start with seed, and farmers are faced with the demand to feed an ever-growing population. So when they choose certified seed, they're getting the peace of mind that they're getting a good product, one that has traceability, and we know where it comes from.
What do you wish more people, farmers, the general public, knew about Canada's certified seed and certification system?
Well, to start with farmers, when they choose certified seed, they're putting money back into the plant breeding system in Canada. And so that helps to bring us new varieties and make them more profitable. So there's new varieties being produced every day, and they're better at drought tolerance, pest tolerance. They have disease protection. So that's really important for the farmers, and it'll make them more money in the end, because they have a more sustainable product. And then for the consumer at large, they if farmers are purchasing certified seed, they have the traceability aspect. Whether it's going into food or malt barley, a lot of maltsters are asking for that traceability factor, so they're asking for certified seed. So it's really important that, that this program is launched now and people know the benefits of the certified seed program.
All right. And for those who are looking for more information about Canadian certified seed, they can check out choosecertifiedseed.ca. Larry, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
My pleasure, Lindsay.
When we come back on RealAg Radio, we've got some new data to discuss. The labor shortage as it applies to 2030. Some really concerning information. The question is, what are we going to do about it? You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, brought to you by Nufarm and the new Oxbow herbicide.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers. Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM, brought to you by the new Oxbow herbicide from Nufarm. Find out more by going to nufarm.ca. Well, like many industries in the country, it's hard to find people to work. And it's not because people, it's, not to sound like old grandpa here, but it's not because, people are lazy. There's a lot of demand. And it's competitive, very, very competitive. We've got low unemployment. That the numbers speak to that. And one of the concerns is, how do we attract people into the industry of agriculture? Because, listen, this industry is obviously a huge economic driver. It's important to the Canadian economy, but it's also producing food, and people got to eat, right? So this is a real concern for the industry and beyond. Lindsay Smith had a chance to catch up with Jennifer Wright of the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council to talk about some new data around the labor shortage and the workforce, and what does it mean for the industry and Canada in general.
Joining me now, I have Jennifer Wright. She's the Executive Director of the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Lindsay. Nice to be here.
All right, so pretty large, and I'm probably underestimating this, pretty large report out this week from CARC called Sowing Seeds of Change. And this is the ag labor market forecast out to 2030. Wow. Okay, so large undertaking in getting this done. Let's go through some of the high-level findings of this report.
Great. Yes, thank you. This is our third time doing a full update of the agriculture workforce across Canada. And then this is our national report, but we also have provincial and commodity-specific reports coming in the weeks ahead. But it does provide us quite a large overview of what's happening across the workforce in Canada and really the impacts that these labor shortages are having on the industry. So as the report says, agriculture plays a really important role in the Canadian economy, not only from an economic point of view, but for securing food, domestic food supply for Canadians and for export as well. And it's about a $38.8 billion economic industry for Canada. But with the labor shortage, what we're seeing, we've known, agriculture's had a labor shortage that has been growing over the last decades. And we're seeing that just continue to grow, where we're estimating it's impacting our sales by about $3.5 billion. And that is an increase from $3 billion that was reported in our last report in 2018.
Those are big numbers. I mean, that's a huge chunk of change. So where do these losses sort of stem from? Are these opportunities not met? Is this work that doesn't get done? How do we quantify where these losses are actually coming from?
Yeah, it really is. I think in the past in our research, we would see that in many cases, employers in the employer survey part of the research were just reporting that they were, working longer hours, and that their employees were working longer hours to try to keep up with the not having enough employees on the ground. But now I would say we're starting to see things like just not being able to keep up to that demand. Certainly that's not a sustainable way to work either. Mm-hmm. But seeing lost sales, seeing things like, deciding either to not expand or to reduce the amount of production. Anecdotally, we've heard of some farmers leaving the industry altogether because they just can't keep up to trying to meet that workforce demand that they can't fill. So it does, I think, have a pretty strong impact on the industry overall, and certainly on the Canadian food supply.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's also in the report, and as you mentioned, there will be sort of subsequent reports on this. This is sort of the overall, the national look, and then you'll delve deeper. But there is in this report, industry-specific challenges broken down by several different industries, and they're different between some of these industries. So what are some of the discrepancies in, trying to find solutions to this issue? What do we see different between, say, a dairy sector or, the grain and oilseed sector? What are some of the differences in the challenges in finding a workforce?
Yeah, so there are differences. There's certainly a lot of commonalities around, where the work is done. Although there is more urban food production than we may have had in the past, most of the food production and agriculture production is done in more rural areas. So shrinking populations in rural areas, access to affordable housing in rural areas, and transportation, things like that impact kind of all the commodities. Mm-hmm. But the way that things are produced, depending on the commodity, is also very different. So grains and oilseeds, you may have fewer employees, but because you have larger equipment, combines, things like that. But you're facing challenges of, again, that rural location, some of the, ups and downs of the season, because, planting season and harvest season are extremely labor intensive, and then in between might not be as much. And then when you look at, cattle production or animal production, that is kind of a different, more steady, perhaps, work across the calendar year. So there are some differences, but there are a lot of commonalities as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, part of this, of looking at this issue, and we sometimes we get really good at identifying a problem. It's a little more difficult to institute change to actually solve said problem. But there's several different topics in the building the future workforce section. And one of those is reaching untapped labor pools. So what are from this report, what were some of the findings of where we could be drawing workers that were not?
I think it's building awareness across populations of the opportunities that are available in agriculture. I think, certainly our organization's been doing quite a bit of work in trying to connect in with post-secondary students, for example, that might be in programs not related to agriculture. They believe not related to agriculture, where we can really, talk about the opportunities what you could do with your environmental science degree in agriculture, what you could do with your IT degree or diploma in agriculture, and making those connections with students that might be more suburban, urban dwellers at this point, but making them aware of what opportunities they could have within the industry. That's, I think, a huge component of this. I think it's also, connecting in with new Canadians and many new Canadians do bring agriculture experience from where they have from their home country, but they may be living in, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. How do we connect in better with them to ensure that they're aware of the opportunities that are here in Canadian agriculture as well? So a huge amount of work to do on that front. Certainly through our National Workforce Strategic Plan, we've really brought industry together to talk about some of these initiatives and some of the things that we can do in a number of different areas to ensure that we're addressing this shortage so that we don't, continue to have it grow, but that we're putting in solutions that can really help ensure that the industry has the workforce they need going forward.
So, and that's, I guess, maybe where we'll leave it today. And I highly recommend everyone head on over to the CARC website, go check out this report. It's extensive, and there's a lot of really great things in here. So we'll look at a few of them. But looking, forward, and this is, a report sort of looking out to 2030. What action items really have to happen now, or what do you hope to see the industry do with a report like this to sort of start to address some of these challenges going forward?
Well, I think the industry has been working for a number of years to, try to address some of these challenges. And again, through the Workforce Strategic Plan, we've really come together to action on some of these issues as well. But the report, it does provide a lot of data, provides some concrete numbers to what a lot of producers are feeling day to day when, they know that they have a labor shortage. They're not alone. But I think the data provides some strong evidence in what we as an industry can do, but also support from other stakeholders and government on policy to ensure that things are moving forward in the right direction and that we're able to attract and retain the workforce that we need for the Canadian agriculture industry.
All right, Jennifer Wright with CARC, as we call it. What is the website address that we can send people to find this report?
The website address is www.cahrc-ccrha.ca.
That's right, French and English. Very important. Okay, Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
That was Jennifer Wright of Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. Yeah, the solution still feels somewhat elusive. And as I'm listening to Jennifer break down the issue and talk about, non-conventional sources of labor and things like that, and obviously this shortage of labor impacts different streams of agriculture in different ways, right? Fruit and vegetable, horticulture, much more impacted than, say, a grain farm. But a grain farm's still struggling as well for many of the same drivers. It does make me wonder. This gap is not necessarily closing. We've been aware of it. We haven't been able to solve it. If I was sitting on a farm, basically, I think anywhere in Canada, I think I would be looking into and investing in as much as possible any way that I could automate activities on the farm. Right, and so in the dairy case, there's obviously milking robots, there's feed pushers. When we interviewed Key Jim a couple weeks ago at the CattleCon convention, he was talking about a feedlot he's building in Nebraska where he envisions pen check. Some of the pen checking can be done through sensors, robotic, autonomous feed trucks, any way possible to reduce the reliance on labor. it feels more and more as this issue becomes more and more elusive, and we see how Canadians in general are pushing back on immigration. We heard the immigration minister say, I think it was a couple weeks ago, where Canadians are too reliant on temporary foreign workers. Excuse me? We can't fill these positions as is. So I think there is some educating the government here as well. So, yeah, this whole situation continues to really not go away. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hear some audio that Kelvin Hepner grabbed last week at Crop Connect talking about renewable diesel and Canadian canola crush. Some interesting data that he got from Chris Vervaet at COPA. You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Oxbow Herbicide from Nufarm.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. And welcome back to RealAg Radio, and brought to you by the new Oxbow herbicide, powered by Duplasm technology from Nufarm. Find out more by going to nufarm.ca. Well, on Friday's show, when we were at the Cargill think tank event, we talked a lot about renewable diesel and the clean fuel regulation. We're now going to hear a little bit more. Kelvin Hepner had a chance to catch up with Chris Vervaet. He is with COPA. That's the organization that represents all of the canola and oil processors in the country. Get his feeling and sentiment and thoughts when it comes to the opportunity for not only renewable diesel, but also sustainable aviation fuel. Here's that conversation.
Again, pleased to be joined now by Chris Vervaet, Executive Director of the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association. And Chris, it's been a few months, over a year now, since I think we last talked and did an update on where things are at with all of the new canola crush processing capacity coming on stream in Western Canada. Can you bring us up to speed on that capacity, that increase that in demand for ultimately for canola grown on the prairies?
Yeah, so I think the last time we met, Calvin, was almost a year ago to the day in Brandon. So there is 3 of the 5 announcements for expanded crush that have been made over the last 3 or 4 years are under construction. They're at various stages of construction, but that would represent in total roughly 3 to 3.5 million tons of additional capacity that'll come on once those plants are complete in the years ahead.
What's that in terms of percentage versus current demand or existing
demand? So that would be approximately an increase of 30% of capacity compared to where we are today.
Okay. And that one, I know one is still up in the air because there is an acquisition or a merger that's underway as well. So I guess that one is probably still under review.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the right way to categorize that particular facility, that it is still being reviewed.
Okay. So what does this mean in terms of timeline for when this demand is going to come on stream? And, of course, there's been lots of discussion about what that means for where Canadian canola goes, whether it goes to export markets or stays domestic.
Yeah, I think when we see some of this capacity coming online in the months and years ahead, I'd like to think that it's a very exciting time for the industry, again, to have that value-added processing to take place here in Canada. Export markets are still going to be a big part of the equation, right? So we often think, okay, so this is all going to be staying in our own backyard. We can't lose sight of the fact that a lot of our canola oil ends up in the export market. Think about the United States as really being one of those key markets, not just in terms of our traditional market for canola oil, it's also our fastest growing market owing to the boom in biofuel demand in the United States. And then we can't lose sight of canola meal. We're going to have a lot more canola meal that is going to be coming into the marketplace. And we think that marketplace, in terms of more canola meal, is offshore. So exports are still, again, a really big part of the equation.
Okay. Are we making progress in terms of connecting some of those dots and figuring out what that picture might look like for some of those other components?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, and really kudos to the Canola Council of Canada and the value chain's efforts to try to diversify some of our markets offshore, in particular for meal. Again, this is the big question that's looming over the industry. Where are we going to find a home for this meal? And I can tell you that the Canola Council is on it.
Okay. Say I'm a customer from Japan. I've always bought X number of, I guess, I don't know, is it in liters? X quantity of canola oil from Canada, and I've been a reliable, consistent supplier or purchaser, and you've been, likewise, Canada's been a reliable, consistent supplier. What does this mean for that relationship, having this increased demand for canola processing domestically here in Canada?
Yeah, I think there's a balance there, right? So we are going to see more seed move into value-added processing here in Canada. This is something we've always wanted. So to see it start to take shape is really a big benefit and a big opportunity for our entire value chain. That doesn't mean that we won't have seed for sale. I think that's a bit of a misnomer where folks feel like there's not going to be any seed left to export or to ship to traditional markets like Japan. I think there is going to be a balance there where we will continue as a canola industry to be able to sell to those traditional markets.
Yeah, I guess Japan would buy as seed, not as oil.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So we've also seen investment, of course, in soybean processing in North America as well, including not far across the border from here in southern Manitoba. What does that impact, or how does that affect future demand for canola oil if we're also seeing all this other oilseed processing coming on stream?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more feedstock available for the growing biofuel industry in North America. As we see the biofuel market continue to grow, we believe that the supply needs to be there, whether it's going to be from soy crush or canola crush. The biofuel demand, in our opinion, in the years ahead is going to be able to basically satisfy that supply that is coming online.
We've also seen investment announcements in sustainable aviation fuel. Airlines certainly are interested in it, and we're seeing processors announcing processing facilities or looking at least at studies to build processing facilities, for example, at Portage La Prairie here down the highway from Winnipeg. Is that picture also becoming clearer in terms of what SAF demand could look like?
I think it is. My opinion is that the sustainable aviation fuel might still have a few years to develop, but it is becoming clear. And I think that example of Azure being announced in southern Manitoba as a possible plant to produce sustainable aviation fuel speaks to the fact that things are starting to crystallize on SAF. Again, maybe a few more years down the road before we see some of that production capacity to come online. But the opportunities are really, again, pardon the pun here, but sky's the limit.
Is renewable diesel further advanced in terms, or mature in terms of knowing what that demand is going to look like?
I think it is, and the primary reason that it is more mature is when we talk about some of the different biofuel programs that exist, whether it's the clean fuel regulation, the low carbon fuel standard in California. These have always been centered on road transportation. There's room for sustainable aviation fuel in some of these programs. British Columbia is a perfect example where we start to see programs putting mandates in place for blending and for carbon intensity reductions for jet fuel. But again, they're not as far along as the renewable diesel markets are.
What's the early word on how the clean fuel regulation implementation last summer? It's now, I guess, 3/4 of a year kind of that it's been in effect. What are we seeing in terms of demand, and is it coming from Canadian sources, or is there room for more Canadian supply to help meet that demand?
Yeah, great question. We hope to see some more visibility on the dynamics of that market soon. So similar to some of the other biofuel markets that exist, again, using California as the example, they will publish a lot of data and information on the credits that are earned and what type of feedstocks are being used in those marketplaces. We haven't seen that yet from the clean fuel regulation. We hope to see that soon. But implementation overall, the supply chain is starting to sort things out. The Canola Council of Canada, COPA, and the broader canola family, including the CCGA and the provincial commissions, are actually hosting an informational webinar next week where we're going to really dive into some of the specifics of how a farmer and the rest of the supply chain can participate in the clean fuel regulation.
Okay. I guess also south of the border, we're also seeing different EPA decisions on where canola potentially fits as a feedstock. Can you bring us up to speed on that process as well? I'm assuming COPA has also at least been involved in the comment period on some of that.
Yeah, activity in the United States really continues to be a top priority because of how large that market is and how large we think that market is going to be going forward. And again, it's all based on policy and different incentives. One of our key items that we're focusing on at the moment in the United States is the IRA, tax incentives, the carbon intensity of canola. These are all important pieces that we are working on.
All right. Thanks for the update today, Chris, and we'll stay tuned to see where this all unfolds in the coming years.
Great, my pleasure. Thanks.
That was Kelvin Hepner of Real Agriculture talking to Chris Vervaet of COPA. And similar to what we heard last week, there is major excitement and anticipation of the positive impact of the CFR, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. And I continue to ask stakeholders, people that know a lot about the regulations, the demand flow, and they've studied this. Okay, are we overhyping it? Are we kind of putting too much of the are we shooting the expectation way too high here in terms of what this could mean for the market? And I continue to hear from people, Shaun, no. And in some ways that kind of terrifies me. And in other ways, it really is kind of interesting to see how this is all shaking out. And from a farmer's perspective, and I know some of you are like, I don't, we're legislating demand. Okay, and what about food versus fuel? And what happens when the government incentives stop? And so all of those are I think legitimate things to point out, and in some cases very, very true. It does seem right now, though, if you just take the United States for example, on both sides of the aisle, there is real interest in biofuels, in this next stage of biofuels, especially when it comes to renewable diesel and SAF. Now, one of the big battles that, is kind of outside Chris's wheelhouse, but, how we look at corn-based ethanol and corn being a feedstock for SAF going forward, that's a battle yet to be fought. But there is real opportunity here. And for the farmer, if you just put your farmer hat on for a second and push away all of the politics of all of this, because I do believe that some of you have been writing me emails saying, hey, I don't like this CFR thing because it's liberal legislation. And that might be just looking at it, I think, a little bit too simplistically and not necessarily being fair to what it is. Now, the Conservatives have said it's a second carbon tax. Not sure I'm willing to say, yeah, I can latch onto that. Is the CFR maybe too complicated? I've heard that from a lot of biofuel insiders. CFR way too complicated. Could have been a lot more simplistic. And maybe that's something the Conservatives fix. But for a farmer, this is demand. This is diversification of demand. And the more demand we have, the more liquid that demand is from different sources, the better off the farmer is at the end of the day, I think, putting it as simplistically as possible. Will it all live up to the hype? Well, time's going to tell. But it definitely is looking pretty good here right now in the early part of 2024 and the opportunity that is out there. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, find us across any of the social media platforms. You can also always call the Real Ag Feedback line, 855-776-6147. I want to thank everybody for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. Big shout out to Oxbow herbicide from Nufarm. Find out more by going to nufarm.ca. Talk to you again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this Real Ag Radio podcast brought to you by Authority Strike Herbicide from FMC. Strike twice with 2 Group 14 modes of action and take care of the toughest broadleaf weeds, including kochia, cleavers, Russian thistle, and pigweed. See your local retailer today for more information.